If you see someone pull up to a stoplight, in this roaring, custom-ordered $100,000 Ferrari, like, what is the very first thing you actually know about their financial situation?
Well, I mean, society conditions us to immediately think, oh, that person is incredibly wealthy, right?
Right, exactly. But if we actually look at the math, the only objective truth in that exact moment
Mm.
is that they have $100,000 less in their bank account than they did yesterday.
Yeah, or, which is honestly, statistically, way more likely, they're just $100,000 deeper in debt.
Yeah, totally. Because we are just completely surrounded by these visual illusions of success. We treat wealth like it's, I don't know, a math equation or some kind of fashion show.
And in reality, the most successful people on Earth are playing this completely invisible game. I mean, it is the ultimate invisible asset.
Which is exactly what we're getting into today. So, welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to decode the psychology of wealth.
Right, we want to figure out how the ultra-rich literally think differently, how they process risk, how they regulate their emotions, which is way different than the average person.
Oh, massively different. And we are pulling from a really huge stack of research for this one. We've got neuroscience interviews with Dr. Shweta Aditya, focusing on brain optimization.
Plus those timeless financial frameworks, like Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money.
Yeah, and we're combining all of that with direct observations of billionaire habits from entrepreneurs like Dan Lok.
It's such a compelling synthesis, I think, because it bridges the biological hardware of the brain with the emotional software of behavioral economics.
It really does. We are essentially reverse engineering the mental architecture of peak performers, just to give you, the listener, a shortcut to financial literacy.
Which is something I think everyone could use, right?
Oh, 100%. Okay, let's unpack this. Before we even touch a dollar bill or debate investment strategies, we have to establish the physical baseline.
Right, the actual hardware.
Exactly. Is a highly successful person's brain genuinely wired differently? And to answer that, we first need to clear out some junk science.
Oh, please tell me you're bringing up the 10% thing.
I am absolutely bringing up the 10% thing, this persistent myth that human beings only use 10% of our brains.
That is easily one of the most stubborn misconceptions in pop psychology. I mean, Dr. Aditya is very clear on this. Your entire brain is always active.
Right. Always.
Yeah, even the act of just sitting quietly and holding a glass of water, that requires immense neurological coordination across multiple regions of the brain.
So if you're looking at something, your visual cortex is firing.
Mm.
If you're listening to us right now, your auditory cortex is lit up.
Exactly. So the distinction between an average earner and a billionaire, it isn't about unlocking some dormant percentage of gray matter.
No, it's about how they utilize the bandwidth of a very specific 40% of the brain, right? The frontal cortex.
Yes, this is the critical differentiator. Because from an evolutionary standpoint, the human brain's massive frontal cortex is our defining feature.
It's basically the command center.
Right, for logic, emotional regulation, complex problem solving, long-term planning, all of that. But housed deep within the older, more primal regions of the brain is the amygdala.
Ah, the amygdala.
Yeah, it's this tiny almond-shaped structure that acts as this hyper-vigilant watchman. Its sole evolutionary purpose is to scan your environment for threats and instantly trigger a fight, flight, or freeze response.
Just to keep you alive,
To
basically.
keep you from getting eaten.
But the fundamental flaw in our modern operating system is that this almond-shaped watchman, it literally cannot tell the difference between a physical predator chasing you through the woods and, a passive-aggressive email from a client.
It's so true. The biological reaction is identical. The amygdala floods your body with cortisol and adrenaline, which physically restricts blood flow to the frontal cortex.
Wait, so it physically restricts it?
Yeah, it literally shuts down your ability to think logically. The research indicates that the average person spends roughly 80% of their waking hours trapped in what neuroscientists call limbic loops.
Limbic loops. That sounds exhausting.
It is. They're constantly ruminating on past regrets or, catastrophizing about the future, reacting to minor stressors. Their amygdala is constantly hijacking the system.
Which is the amygdala hijack, right?
Right. And what sets elite peak performers apart is that they actively train their frontal cortex to be so robust, so dominant, that it actually overrides the amygdala's panic signals.
But they maintain executive function even when, a multi-million-dollar deal is collapsing or they're facing intense public scrutiny.
Exactly. They stay completely calm.
The mechanics of that are fascinating, but Let's actually look at how this plays out in the very first 10 minutes of your day.
Oh, the morning routine. This is
Yeah.
crucial.
Yeah, because most people wake up to a blaring, aggressive smartphone alarm, right? They immediately grab the screen, start scrolling through notifications, read a stressful headline, check their work messages.
Which is terrible for you.
It's the worst. Think about your brain waves like a manual transmission in a car. When you are in deep restorative sleep, you're producing delta waves.
Right, which is the engine just idling in neutral.
Exactly. And when you're highly stressed or engaged in frantic problem solving, you're producing fast-paced beta waves.
So waking up to an alarm and instantly checking a work email.
It is the biological equivalent of shifting a car from neutral directly into fifth gear while just flooring the gas pedal. You are violently grinding the gears of your nervous system.
It is a brutal jolt to your physiology. I mean, you are voluntarily throwing yourself into a stressed beta wave limbic loop before your feet even touch the floor.
You're just setting yourself up to fail.
Yeah, you are effectively ensuring that your amygdala will be in the driver's seat for the rest of the day. It makes you reactive rather than proactive.
Okay, so how do we fix the transmission? Like, how do peak performers shift smoothly into high gear without completely burning out the clutch?
Well, they fiercely protect the first hour of their day. The goal is to cultivate alpha and theta brainwaves.
And those are the states of calm and creativity, right?
Exactly. Calm, elevated creativity, and flow states. Dr. Adacia outlines a specific framework that peak performers use called the movers routine.
Right, movers.
Yeah, it's designed to systematically prime that frontal cortex.
Let's break down that acronym for everyone. So it's meditation, oxygenation, which is just focused breath work to regulate the nervous system, visualization, exercise, reading affirmative content, and scribing.
And scribing is essentially journaling, just to dump all those unhelpful thoughts out of your working memory.
Right, and you don't need like a 3-hour wellness retreat to do this. Doing each of those for just a few minutes systematically warms up the neurological engine.
And what's fascinating here is the V in that routine, visualization.
Oh, this is my favorite part.
Right, because we so often dismiss visualization as this esoteric or overly mystical thing like The Secret or whatever, but the neurological data proves it is highly mechanical.
I am so glad you brought that up because the sources highlight a clinical study that just perfectly illustrates the underlying mechanism of this.
The piano study, yeah.
Yeah, the piano study. So researchers separated subjects into two groups. One group spent 3 months physically practicing the piano.
Okay, standard practice.
Right. But the second group, they never touched a keyboard. They simply sat in a quiet room and vividly imagined playing the piano.
Yeah.
Like mentally rehearsing the finger movements and the specific sounds.
Just visualizing it entirely.
Entirely in their heads. And when researchers scanned their brains at the end of the study, the group that only visualized the practice had grown the exact same neural pathways and brain cells in their motor cortex as the group who physically played the instrument.
That is just wild. And if we connect this to the bigger picture of financial success, I mean, the implications are staggering.
Right, because it means it's real hardware changes.
Exactly. When you vividly visualize successfully navigating a high-stakes negotiation or, say, managing a crisis calmly, you are not just hoping for a good outcome.
You're literally building it.
Yes, you are physically pre-wiring the hardware of your frontal cortex. You're building the neurological infrastructure of a highly regulated, successful person before the stressful event even happens.
Which means that a strong frontal cortex isn't just some nice biohack for a pleasant morning.
Yeah.
It is the absolute prerequisite for managing the psychological software bugs that ruin people financially.
Because no matter how high your IQ is, if you cannot regulate your emotional state, the market is eventually going to crush you.
100%. And this is exactly where the biological transition into behavioral finance happens, I think.
Oh, definitely. The amygdala's fear response is the exact mechanism that keeps the vast majority of the population trapped in what Rich Dad, Poor Dad identifies as the rat race.
Right, the infamous rat race. I mean, we all know the traditional definition of it. You get up, you go to a job, you probably don't even like to pay for a lifestyle you can barely afford, and you just repeat this until you retire or die.
Mostly until you die. But what's interesting is looking at the unseen emotions that are actually driving that cycle.
The fear and the greed.
Exactly. The cycle is powered by two unmanaged primitive emotions: First, the amygdala triggers the fear of poverty, the fear of not being able to survive.
Which is very real biological panic.
Right, and that panic forces you to seek security, so you go get a job. But the very moment you receive a paycheck, that fear temporarily subsides, and the second emotion takes over, which is greed or unbridled desire.
It's a dopamine hit.
Yes, you immediately want the dopamine hit of spending that money on a nicer car or expensive dinners or a bigger house. But as soon as the money is spent, the fear of lacking resources comes roaring right back.
And so you are forced to return to work.
It's an infinite loop. Logical planning is completely absent. People are just simply reacting to the chemical cocktails in their own brains.
They are letting the temporary relief of a paycheck dictate their entire long-term behavior.
Yeah.
And the sources actually point out a very specific linguistic habit that reinforces this trap.
Oh, the phrase.
Yes, the phrase, "I can't afford it."
That phrase is just a psychological dead end.
It really is. When you look at an investment property or a business opportunity or even just a personal luxury, and you state out loud, "I can't afford it," you're making a declarative statement.
You're telling your brain the story is over.
Exactly. You are signaling to your brain that the problem is unsolvable and that the frontal cortex takes that cue and just powers down. It gets lazy because you've essentially given it permission to stop working.
Which is why the ultra-wealthy actively scrub this phrase from their vocabulary. They just don't say it.
Right. Instead, they shift that declarative statement into a question. They ask, "How can I afford it?"
And this raises such an important question about how we direct our cognitive energy. By asking, "How can I afford it?" you are issuing a direct command to your frontal cortex.
You're forcing it to turn back on.
Yes, you are forcing those neural pathways to activate, to search for alternative solutions, to evaluate risk, to find hidden leverage. It physically transitions the brain from a state of passive victimhood into active, high-level problem solving.
I want to push back on this underlying motivation, though, because if we accept that billionaires have trained their frontal cortex to overcome that primal fear of poverty, right?
Right.
And they aren't just motivated by the greedy desire to buy more shiny consumer goods.
Yeah.
Then what is the actual fuel in their engine?
That's a great question.
Right, because once a person hits a net worth of, say, $50 or $100 million,
Yeah.
they've secured their survival for generations. So why do they keep working?
What's fascinating here is a perspective shared by wealth observers like Dan Locke. For the ultra-wealthy, money undergoes a complete conceptual transformation.
It's not about survival anymore.
Not at all. It ceases to be a tool for basic survival or just a means to acquire luxury. Money simply becomes a metric. It is the scoreboard of how well they are executing their vision.
Ah, okay, so it just becomes an abstract unit of measurement rather than like a ticket to buy things.
Exactly that. They aren't grinding to buy a third vacation home. They're driven by the desire to disrupt stagnant industries, to solve complex global inefficiencies, and fundamentally just to win the game they're playing.
Which completely changes how they see the world.
Entirely. Because their motivation is decoupled from personal consumerism, they view everything through a radically different lens. Like where a middle-class investor might look at an empty lot of dirt and see a place to build a nice residential home.
A billionaire looks at that exact same dirt and visualizes a towering commercial skyscraper, with an integrated subterranean transit hub.
Right. They operate on this principle of being resourceful without resources. They do not need the capital sitting in their bank account to commit to the vision.
They utilize the clarity of the vision to magnetically attract the necessary capital.
Exactly.
Well, if the ultimate goal of accumulating capital isn't to convert it into luxury goods, then we have to aggressively redefine what the concept of wealth actually means.
Yes, we really do.
And this brings us back to that Ferrari paradox we discussed at the very beginning of the deep dive. Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money breaks down the tragic irony of visual status symbols.
Society conditions us to evaluate financial success entirely through visual evidence, right? We judge wealth by the tailoring of a suit, or the zip code of a house, or the badge on a car.
But the paradox is deeply psychological. When you buy a luxury item, the internal motivation is almost always the desire for respect and admiration from others.
You want people to look at you and think, wow, they are important.
Exactly. But when a pedestrian sees a $100,000 sports car drive by, they rarely look at the driver with admiration. The onlooker completely ignores the person behind the wheel and instead imagines themselves driving the car.
It's so true. I mean, the owner traded a massive amount of financial security to purchase the status symbol, only to find out that the symbol doesn't generate respect.
No, it only generates envy and self-reflection in other people.
It is a devastating misallocation of capital driven purely by ego, which leads to one of Housel's most profound insights, I think. Wealth is what you do not see.
Wealth is the income not spent.
It is the portfolio of index funds quietly compounding in a brokerage account somewhere. It is the real estate equity that isn't bragged about at dinner parties.
It's the restraint you exercise when you have the cash to buy a first-class upgrade, but you choose to fly economy instead.
Yes. Building true wealth has less to do with the trajectory of your income and far more to do with the trajectory of your humility. Wealth is simply the gap between your ego and your income.
I love that. And that brings us to the foundational principle of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And this is where we have to look at the psychological gap between knowing something and actually doing it.
Right. Theory versus practice.
Exactly. Because most people listening to this deep dive likely already know the textbook definitions of assets and liabilities.
Sure, they know an asset generates cash flow, like rental properties, dividend stocks, intellectual property.
Right. It puts money in your pocket.
Yeah.
And a liability drains cash flow, like consumer debt, mortgages on primary residences, car loans. Yet incredibly intelligent people still trap themselves in high-income, high-liability lifestyles. Why?
Well, because intellectual knowledge cannot compete with emotional impulse if the frontal cortex isn't trained.
It's the amygdala again.
It always is. It's similar to a professional athlete who knows the precise nutritional breakdown of what they should eat. But, after a stressful loss, they binge on junk food because their amygdala is screaming for the immediate dopamine hit of comfort.
Wow, so financial liabilities are essentially the junk food of the ego.
That's a perfect way to put it. They provide immediate visual validation at the cost of long-term health.
That is a brilliant way to frame it.
Yeah.
And, the concept of paying yourself first, it's often pitched as just this clever budgeting trick. But in this context, it is actually an exercise in psychological endurance.
Absolutely.
Because when you receive your income and you immediately buy income-producing assets before you pay your mortgage, your car loan, or your credit cards.
You are intentionally putting yourself in a position of manufactured scarcity.
Yes. You are forcing yourself to endure the discomfort of figuring out how to survive on whatever's left over. It's like going to the gym. You are starving the ego to feed the asset column.
And it requires immense internal fortitude. If you pay everyone else first, the landlord, the banks, the government, and you only invest whatever scraps are left over, Robert Kiyosaki refers to you as a financial 98-pound weakling.
The 98-pound weakling, wow.
Yeah, because you're allowing the external pressures of society to dictate your financial physiology. Paying yourself first builds the mental muscle required to withstand the pressure of not looking rich right now so that you can actually be rich later.
Okay, so let's walk through this evolution. You have managed your amygdala, you've rewired your vocabulary to be solution-oriented, you've checked your ego, and you are quietly accumulating these invisible assets.
You are successfully climbing the mountain.
Exactly. But the sources highlight a terrifying reality here. The skills required to get wealthy are dangerously different from the skills required to stay wealthy.
They are essentially opposing skill sets. And failing to recognize when to switch between them is what causes so many brilliant entrepreneurs to just crash and burn.
Let's look at the mechanics of that. Because getting wealthy requires an aggressive posture. It demands extreme optimism, a willingness to embrace significant risk, ignoring the odds, putting yourself out on a limb.
Right. But staying wealthy, that demands a defensive posture. It requires frugality, a healthy dose of paranoia, and the constant humbling acknowledgement that everything you have built could be wiped out by factors completely outside of your control.
The contrast between Jesse Livermore and Warren Buffett is just the perfect historical case study for this dynamic.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Jesse Livermore was arguably the most naturally gifted stock trader of the early 20th century. He possessed this supernatural ability to read market momentum.
He took heavily leveraged, massive risks, and he made absolute fortunes. I mean, he famously shorted the market during the 1929 crash and made millions while everyone else was jumping out of windows.
But his brain was entirely wired for the dopamine hit of the risk, right? He only possessed the skill set of getting wealthy.
Exactly. Because his neurological baseline was built on thrill-seeking and immense leverage, he literally could not stop himself.
He lacked the paranoia required to protect his capital.
Yeah. He continued to take massive, concentrated risks, in highly unpredictable markets, and he eventually lost absolutely everything. He died bankrupt.
Now contrast that with Warren Buffett. Buffett is a master allocator of capital, sure, but his defining genius is his survival instinct.
He refuses to utilize catastrophic leverage.
Exactly. He does not panic and liquidate his positions during severe market downturns. He simply ensures that he never gets wiped out, which allows the mathematics of uninterrupted compound interest to do the heavy lifting over, like, 7 decades.
It's the difference between sprinting through a minefield because you think you're fast, carefully walking around it because you actually want to live.
And acknowledging that minefield means we have to talk about the uncomfortable role of luck. Housel's rule that nothing is as good or as bad as it seems is a direct strike against the hubris of that self-made billionaire narrative.
Right, because recognizing luck is the ultimate test of the frontal cortex's ability to remain objective. Take the story of Bill Gates.
Oh, this is a great example.
Gates is a visionary, obviously, a genius programmer, incredibly hard worker. But we have to acknowledge the statistical anomaly of his youth. In 1968, he happened to attend one of the only high schools on the planet that had a teletype computer terminal directly connected to a mainframe.
Right, which was unheard of at the time.
Yeah, he was granted thousands of hours of hands-on programming experience at a time when almost no other teenager in the world even knew what a computer was. Gates himself is the first to admit that without that blind stroke of luck, Microsoft would not exist.
He even noted that success is a terrible teacher because it seduces intelligent people into believing they are infallible.
But here is where I have to challenge the narrative a bit. Because if survival is just about avoiding risk and acknowledging luck and passively waiting for compound interest to do the work, how do we reconcile that with the aggressive work ethic we see in the sources?
What do you mean?
Well, we have quotes from Elon Musk advocating for 80 to 100-hour work weeks if you want to alter the trajectory of humanity. Are we saying you, the listener, need to grind yourself to dust just to build a successful portfolio? Or is there a different way to interpret that intensity?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, that intensity isn't about blind, chaotic grinding or glorifying sleep deprivation. It is about a radical expansion of their time horizon.
Expanding the time horizon. Okay.
Yeah. When peak performers deploy that level of intense focus, they are not operating on a quarterly earnings cycle. They are playing a macroeconomic intergenerational long game.
Right. Like Alibaba.
Yes, consider Alibaba. When they laid out their corporate vision, they drafted a 102-year business plan. They intentionally designed the framework of the company to span across 3 centuries.
A 102-year plan.
Yeah.
I mean, it completely recontextualizes the idea of a bad week at the office.
It neutralizes short-term volatility. When your eyes are fixed on a target a century away, a temporary market crash or a failed product launch doesn't trigger your amygdala. It's just a minor speed bump.
It's the application of the acronym FCUS, right? Follow one course until successful.
Exactly. They do not suffer from shiny object syndrome. They place a highly calculated, massive bet on a single vision, and they dedicate their entire cognitive bandwidth to executing it.
So bringing all of these threads together, the brainwave states, the interrogative problem solving, ignoring the illusion of the Ferrari, starving the ego to build invisible assets, and expanding our time horizons to a century.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But if the end goal isn't just to buy luxury goods to impress strangers, and it isn't to work 100-hour weeks until we collapse, what is the actual point of rewiring our psychology? Like, what is the ultimate payout here?
The absolute highest dividend that money can possibly pay is unbought time. It is freedom.
Unbought time. I love that.
And it's the profound ability to wake up every single morning, evaluate the world, and say, I have complete autonomy to do whatever I want today, with whomever I choose, for as long as I desire.
Because true wealth isn't about accumulation.
No, it is about sovereignty. It is having the financial buffer to walk away from a toxic work environment without fear. It's the ability to take 6 months off to care for a sick family member without experiencing a panic attack.
Or just the freedom to invest in a passion project that might take a decade to yield a return.
Exactly. The greatest intrinsic value of capital is that it gives you total ownership of your own existence.
That is the ultimate metric of success. So, to wrap this up, here is the custom roadmap derived from the minds of the ultra-wealthy.
Tomorrow morning, start right away.
Yes, tomorrow morning, do not allow the alarm clock to immediately throw you into a limbic loop. Protect that first hour. Prime your frontal cortex using the movers routine.
Specifically leveraging that mechanical power of visualization to pre-wire your brain for the day's challenges.
Refuse to let the primal emotions of fear and greed dictate your cash flow. Physically banish the phrase, "I can't afford it" from your vocabulary, and force your mind to do the heavy lifting by asking, "How can I afford it?"
Check your ego. Recognize that real wealth is the discipline of what you do not spend.
Build your invisible assets and cultivate the paranoia required to survive the long game.
It is a fundamental rewiring of how you interact with the world, moving from a reactionary participant to an active architect of your own reality.
We started this deep dive discussing how easy it is to look at a bank statement and mistakenly believe it tells the whole story of a person's success. But if true wealth is ultimately defined by having absolute sovereignty over your own time, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
That's a tough one, too.
Take a hard, objective look at your calendar for tomorrow. Look at the meetings, the obligations, and the tasks filling those blocks of time. Does your schedule actually belong to you? Or does it belong to your liabilities?